Whispers followed her. She's just the cleaner. Why is she so close to the stage? Hope she knows her place. Suddenly, the MC rushed up to the mic, flustered. Our guest speaker, Madam Sola Williams, has canceled last minute. Please bear with us. A wave of disappointment swept through the hall. Some muttered. Others reached for their car keys. Then, the cleaner stepped forward.
Excuse me, if it's okay, I'd like to speak.
Silence. Then, laughter. You speak? What's this? A joke? But her eyes held no fear. She climbed the steps slowly, removed her gloves, and faced the crowd. They didn't know her name, but they were about to hear her story. Not the one written in fancy bios or printed on glossy brochures. No, the real story. The one that started long before the chandeliers, the gowns, or the stage. To understand why she spoke that day, you have to know where she came from. And it all began with a girl in a mop bucket in a city that never looked her in the eye. The apartment buzzed with life even before sunrise, sirens in the distance, someone arguing over rent next door, and the clatter of a mop bucket down the hallway. Ada tied her hair into a tight bun, pulled on her hoodie, and quietly stepped out so her mother could keep sleeping. The city always smelled like a mix of fried grease, cold air, and hustle. Her shift started at 6 a.m., but she left early to catch the bus before it filled up. Same route, same seats, same faces too tired to talk. At just 22, Ada had already mastered silence. She cleaned offices all morning, took online classes by afternoon, and helped her mom stock shelves at the corner store by night. Some days, she didn't even sit. But she moved with purpose. One day, her mother always said, "They'll see you for who you are, not what you wear." Ada didn't argue. She just nodded, studied harder, worked faster, and whispered her dreams to herself when nobody was listening. Ada sat by the window on the morning bus, her hoodie pulled over her head. She liked watching the city wake up. Corner shops rolling up their gates, street vendors setting up, people rushing to jobs they didn't talk about. Nobody smiled. Everybody just minded their business. Her shoes were old but still clean. That was important to her. She didn't have much, but she had pride. She got off near the tall office building where she worked. 11 floors, big glass doors, shiny floors that showed every footprint. She started upstairs like always, emptying bins, wiping desks, cleaning bathrooms. Most workers barely noticed her. Some didn't speak at all. One woman spilled her coffee and just walked off, like Ada was expected to clean it without a word. She didn't complain. Her mother always said, "Do your work like someone is watching, even when they're not." So Ada kept her head down, did her job, and stayed quiet. But deep down, she knew this wasn't where her story ended. By the time Ada got home, the sun was already dipping behind the buildings. The air smelled like fried plantain and hot oil from the food stand downstairs. She slipped off her shoes by the door and went straight to help her mother fold laundry. They didn't talk much while working, but the silence was warm. Her mother hummed an old gospel tune as she stacked shirts into neat piles. "How was work?" she finally asked. "Normal," Ada said, which really meant hard, but I survived. Later that night, Ada sat at the small kitchen table, flipping through her online class notes on her phone. The light from the bulb above buzzed slightly, but she didn't notice any more. Her mother sat across from her, sewing a loose button back on a blouse. "Ada," she said quietly, "no matter where you work, speak well. Stand tall. You don't know who's watching." Ada nodded, but her eyes stayed on the screen. It wasn't that she didn't hear. She just didn't feel seen yet. Not by the world, not even by herself. The next morning, Ada wiped down a conference table while a group of interns filed in, chatting about marketing pitches and weekend plans. One of them dropped a flyer. She picked it up, an invite to a youth empowerment summit happening in 2 weeks, free for under 25s. She hesitated, then slipped it into her pocket before anyone noticed. It wasn't like she had time for events, but something about it stuck with her. Maybe it was the words written in bold at the top. "Your story deserves a stage." That evening, after dinner, Ada showed the flyer to her mom. "Should I go?" she asked. Her mother studied it in silence, then smiled. "Go," she said. "Even if you just sit and listen, go." That night, Ada lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what it would feel like to be in a room where people actually wanted to hear you speak. She wasn't sure she had anything worth sharing, but the thought of showing up, just once, just for herself, felt like the first real yes she'd said in a long time. On the day of the summit, Ada stood in front of her mirror, wearing her cleanest blouse and the same shoes she wore to work. She pressed her hair back into a bun, then tied a scarf around the edges. Her mother handed her a small brown bag with lunch and said, "Walk in like you belong, even if your name's not on anything." Ada smiled, but her stomach felt tight. She had never been to an event like this before. No one there would know her. And that was the scary part. The hall was bigger than she imagined. Rows of young people in blazers and heels moved confidently between booths and photo backdrops. Ada moved slowly, hugging her bag close. She didn't say much, just listened. A woman at the back was giving a talk about turning pain into purpose. Something about her voice pulled Ada in, not the way she spoke, but what she didn't hide. For the first time, Ada realized you didn't need big words to be heard. You just needed the truth. After the session ended, Ada waited until most people had left, then walked up to the woman who spoke. "Thank you," she said quietly. The woman turned, looked her in the eye, and smiled. "You have a calm strength. Ever thought of telling your story someday?" Ada shook her head. "There's nothing special to tell." The woman chuckled softly. "That's where you're wrong." She handed Ada a small card. "There's another event next month. It's smaller. You won't need a ticket, just show up." Ada held the card all the way home, careful not to fold or drop it. That moment stayed with her, the way someone looked at her without pity or dismissal. It didn't mean her life had changed. Not yet. But it cracked something open in her. That night, she pulled out an old notebook and wrote a few lines about her job, her mother, and her dreams. She didn't know if it was a speech or just a letter to herself, but for the first time, her voice felt real, even if no one else heard it yet. Every night after work, Ada sat at the kitchen table and wrote. Not long essays or speeches, just small pieces, a memory, a lesson, something her mother once said. At first, the words came slowly, like peeling something stuck. But over time, her hand moved with more ease. She didn't tell anyone. It felt like a secret, something growing quietly in her chest. She didn't know where it was leading, but it felt like the beginning of something she had always been afraid to claim. One night, her mother walked in, saw the pages, and smiled. "So you're finally writing it down?" Ada looked up. "Writing what?" Her mother pulled out a chair. "Your story. You've been carrying it for years." Ada didn't answer, but she didn't hide the papers either. She kept writing. A part of her still doubted she had anything worth sharing. But another part, small but steady, was beginning to believe maybe, just maybe, she did. It started as a whisper, a flyer taped to the back of the staff room door. Open mic night. All voices welcome. Most walked past it. Ada didn't. She read it 3 times before tearing it down and folding it into her pocket. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay awake, thinking of all the voices she'd scrubbed under, the ones that never saw her. Could hers finally be heard? Her. She almost backed out. Twice. But when she walked into the hall that evening, the noise, the lights, the chatter, it all faded. She wasn't there to impress. She wasn't even there to win. She just needed to say it out loud, even if her voice shook. She joined the queue backstage, clutching her scribbled notes. Someone asked her name. She said, "Ada." They nodded and pointed. "You're up next." The hall fell silent the moment Ada stepped on stage. No podium, no grand lights. Just a mic and a room full of strangers. Her palms were damp, but she unfolded her paper anyway. Her voice cracked at first, but no one laughed. They listened. She spoke of silence, of growing up in corners, of hearing everyone but never being heard. It wasn't polished. It wasn't perfect. But it was hers. And when she stepped down, the room didn't clap. They stood. After the event, a woman with soft eyes and a lanyard introduced herself. "We had someone scheduled to speak next week, but they canceled. Would you consider filling in?" Ada blinked. She'd never been invited anywhere, let alone to speak. "Me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman smiled. "Yes, you. You have something real. Don't hide it." Ada nodded slowly. Maybe this was how it began. Not with a dream, but with a crack in the wall. The school's annual Women's Voices Assembly was supposed to feature a guest speaker, some doctor from Abuja. But that morning, word came that she couldn't make it. The principal was frantic. The program was already printed. Parents were arriving. Then someone mentioned Ada. "She spoke at open mic night last month," one teacher said. People were moved. Maybe she could step in? Ada was in the library shelving books when they found her. "Just say a few words," the principal begged. "Anything. We just need someone real." She wanted to run. Her hands were shaking. But she thought of that night on stage. How she'd found her voice, even when it cracked. She nodded. In the assembly hall, rows of students, staff, and visitors stared back at her. Ada stepped up to the mic. She didn't have a script. She didn't even have notes. She took a breath. Then another. And spoke. About being quiet for too long. About carrying stories inside your bones. About how girls like her are taught to wait, shrink, apologize. But how that day she wouldn't. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then applause. Loud, honest, rising like a wave. She didn't win anything, but something in her changed. The email came 3 days later. Subject line, "Your voice moved us." Ada nearly deleted it, thinking it was spam. But something made her open it. A woman from a local nonprofit had been in the crowd during the school assembly. "We host monthly talks for young women," the message said. "We'd love for you to speak at the next one." Ada stared at the screen. Her heart did that strange mix of panic and awe. She wasn't a speaker. She shelved books and wrote in notebooks she never shared. But something in the email pulled at her, like a door cracking open just enough. She almost said no, but then she remembered how it felt. The silence after her last word, the room holding its breath, and then applause. So she typed, "Yes, I'd be honored." That night, she didn't sleep much, not from fear this time, but from excitement. Something was shifting, and even though she couldn't name it yet, she felt it. Her life was making room for something bigger. The guest speaker canceled last minute. Whispers passed through the room like wind rustling paper. The organizers fidgeted, unsure what to do. Someone from the local council recognized Ada sitting quietly at the back and whispered her name. "She's the one from the open mic night," they said. Before she could protest, the microphone was handed to her. Her palms were damp, her heart loud, but she stood. The hall wasn't grand. Folding chairs, plastic fans, sweating walls, but everyone was watching. She spoke, not with rehearsed polish or grand gestures, just truth, about fear, about silence, about finding pieces of herself in hidden corners and learning not to shrink for anyone. When she finished, the room was still. Then, claps, loud and rising. A woman from a city paper asked for an interview. Someone else asked if she could speak at their youth center. She didn't cry, not until later when she was alone, barefoot in her room, holding the wrapper her mother had given her that morning, the very one she wore on that stage. She thought of the kitchen table, the letters to nobody, the little voice that once trembled. Now it stood tall, not because she had waited to be chosen, but because she chose herself. The journalist's name was Miss Kehinde, older, sharp-eyed, and curious in a kind way. She sat across from Ada at the community center cafe, recorder between them, sipping Zobo from a paper cup. Her questions weren't like the ones Ada had prepared for in school. They weren't about grades or career plans. Instead, she asked, "When did you first feel like your voice mattered? And what do you tell yourself when the fear creeps back in? Ada hesitated often, searching for words that hadn't been said too many times. She spoke of the night she whispered into the open mic, not knowing anyone had heard. She told her about the wrapper her mother tied around her waist that morning, how it felt like armor, and about the silence she grew up in, thick and stifling like harmattan dust. By the end of the interview, the recorder clicked off, and Miss Kaheen didn't rush to leave. "You know," she said, tucking her notebook into her bag, "your voice doesn't just tell stories, it invites people to find their own." Ada smiled, unsure what to say. When the article came out 2 days later, her face wasn't on the front page, but her words were clear, bold, wrapped in context that made them glow. At first, Ada didn't think anyone would notice, but her inbox filled slowly with strangers, a girl in Port Harcourt who wanted to write but never had the courage, a boy in Ilarin who printed the article and pasted it in his dorm wall. For the first time, Ada realized she wasn't just speaking for herself anymore. Her voice had found cracks in other people's walls, and sunlight was coming through. The room was smaller this time, an old library with peeling paint and cushions scattered on the floor. No microphones, no stage. Just a circle of chairs and young people with eyes that held questions. Ada sat among them, not as a guest speaker but as part of the group. She listened first, to a girl with a soft voice who spoke about losing her father, to a boy who hadn't told anyone he liked to dance until now. The circle wasn't about applause, it was about presence. Ada shared last. Her voice no longer trembled, but it still softened when she spoke of the past. "We carry many things," she said, "but some stories get lighter when we say them out loud." Afterwards, they stayed behind, reluctant to leave. Someone brought Puff Puff in a nylon bag. Another played music softly from their phone. Ada watched them, the way they leaned into each other's stories, how they nodded even in silence. It reminded her of something her mother once said, "Healing doesn't shout, it gathers." And this gathering, small as it was, felt like something beginning, not a performance, not a spotlight, but a return. To self, to the community. She no longer needed permission to belong. She was already inside the circle. Ada's story reminds us that worth isn't always loud or polished. It can come from quiet places, like a mop in a ballroom or late-night scribbles at a kitchen table. Sometimes, the voices we silence the most are the ones people need to hear. Have you ever felt overlooked or underestimated? What did you do with that moment? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else.